Hello, everyone. Welcome to Orthodoxy. My name is Andy Schmidt. I'm your host. Just wanted to talk real quick about the Paradox Press, brand new publication that a business partner and I just started. It is a Christian conservative publication, kind of online magazine. We are doing a soft launch in this first 10 weeks of the publication. So we're just going to release one new essay every single week. That's completely free. You can go over there and read these for free. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can subscribe. All absolutely free. You'll get everything free in these first 10 weeks. And these essays are by some of the best writers in the country, maybe the best in the world. The first one was from Dr. Dale Ahlquist. He is the world leading scholar on G.K. Chesterton, which the whole publication was sort of predicated on the thoughts of G.K. Chesterton. He wrote on localism and that economic theory, but it's not boring. That sounds boring. It's not boring. It's very, very exciting stuff. It's economic theory, but it's for the masses. It's for the general person to read and understand, and it's very interesting. So it's not just this high-level academia. It's actually good, practical writing. That's the first one that came out. The second one that just came out by Dr. David Devil on being profit-pilled. He's called The Great If, basically looking back at the 20th century and learning from the people who warned us of what was going to come. People like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, C.S. Lewis, Schaeffer, G.K. Chesterton himself, and then seeing how those guys even were pulling from the great prophets of the Old Testament and of the Bible. And so warning us for what was going to come in the future and what we could do, what we could change. And so that's all at theparadoxpress.com, theparadoxpress.com. Go over there, take a look around, see what you think, and read through some of the articles. Subscribe, give us your email. We'll send all of these things to your inbox for free. But please, please, please go over there to theparadoxpress.com. Now to the interview. I'm here with Dr. Keith Campbell again, talking about an article that you wrote for Paradox Press, and we'll put the link in the description to the full article. I actually think people should go read the whole essay and then come and listen to this conversation, because I'm going to be directly quoting out of the essay and asking questions. So that'll be in the link in the description. But for those of you who have read, I'm just going to start right out of the gate with some questions related to the beginning of the essay, and we'll just kind of go through it because there's a million things that we could talk about on the topic of narcissism and spirituality and religion and religious leaders. And so I'm just going to start by saying, so you started the essay by saying that you began studying the link between narcissism and religion, with the assumption that religious practice was meant to shrink the ego. Let's just start with, like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm a little biased, I think, because I am coming at this from a little more of a Buddhist perspective, just because I'm a Southern Californian. So I'll start with that. But my kind of naive understanding of religion was that there's this sort of trade-off where you reduce the self, but that gives you connection to something larger than yourself. Sure. So there's a quote from Mihai Dogan, he brought Zen to Japan. He said something like, to study the self is to lose the self is to become one with the 10,000 things. So the ego is sort of seen as a barrier to connection. And it wouldn't just be with God. I mean, it could be with love. It could be with nature. You know, it's just like being connected to yourself, your identity, your narrative of who you are. It kind of doesn't leave a lot of room for other forces, maybe. So I thought generally you reduce yourself and that leaves room for God or connection or higher power or something else, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I think that's even sort of like a older, I don't want to say older way of looking at religion, but I think a lot of the younger generations, and this is sort of the reason why I asked this question, is just they look at religion as sort of less of an opportunity to shrink the ego or to get rid of pride or to be humble, and more of an opportunity to be a part of a community or a group. There's like a big push in that in the last probably 25 years.
Yeah. Well, you know, classically religion has these different social functions, obviously. And one is sort of this, more mystical or direct connection with something divine. But there's also a big, important social and community, social connection, just being part of a community. Right. And there's also social rules and responsibilities and norms and customs that kind of guide your actions and behaviors. So all those things go with religion. And again, I'm a California hippie deadhead. And so my way of thinking about religion is sort of a selfish, a little more Eastern, theosophical, Taoist, whatever perspective. But in many, even in the Buddhist tradition, you'd say the Sangha, the collection of people you're with. But a Catholic mass means group.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, German is Massen. I think that's terrible pronunciation probably, but so Catholic mass is basically doing a group. Right. So I think there's something really important to the groupness of the experience. So now I'm sort of going down a little bit of a different tangent about group experience, but this is what you see in the anthropology of group religious experience would be something like a state of liminality. So I'd join a group. Oh, effervescence is another term they use, but you join a group, you get this sort of group energy, group effervescence. You sort of you enter this threshold state of consciousness as part of the group. And that's where the magic happens, this sort of what they call a liminal phase. We don't use that term liminal. That's where the term subliminal comes from. Yeah. So you enter this liminal phase in the group, and then you return back to normal. So like a Catholic mass or a Grateful Dead show, the same sort of structure. Like you go in, it's sort of basic, you sing some songs, then it gets a little more intense. And then there's the actual mass, the transformation. And then there's usually processes where you actually connect with people, like giving peace to people, introducing yourself. So there's actual connection built in. Sorry, I'm just rambling. You kind of hit me a little bit at the side here.
No, that's...
But yeah, so I do think that group part can be a way of reducing the ego by just shaking somebody's hand, saying we're part of something together. Right. Get real Freudian. We killed the gods, and now we're symbolically eating his dead corpse and becoming one of the same body by doing this. This is all totem and taboo. That you're getting me down another rabbit hole. That gets real dark. I didn't do that in the article.
No, you did. But so one of the things that I was thinking through is sort of the differences in terminology, like the psychological terminology and the theological terminology. And I'm more coming from like Christian theology, where, like, how do you flesh that out in a study like this, where there's, ego is a psychological term, pride is a theological term. Pride has a bunch of moral connotations connected to it, and you're trying to reduce pride in Christian theology and become more humble. Whereas like ego, are there moral connections there? How do you separate that or connect that?
What you're talking about is the process of what we call a construct validation. Okay. So a term like pride, there is a social psychological measurement of pride. We have a definition of pride. We have different forms of pride, some that are more ego-based, some that are more sort of authentic. So we do talk about it. And then there's a scriptural definition. Probably Thomas Aquinas wrote about pride. I don't know. And what I say is, whenever you talk about something, you just sort of define your terms. And I don't know if there's a difference in pride between the way a psychologist would talk about it, and somebody in a theological setting would talk about it, other than maybe, the other question then you have is the meta-psychological question. Like, when we talk about a human living his life, and then you're going to see differences, because if you're coming from a Christian tradition, you can say, well, an important part of the human condition is sin. Right. And that's when you're separated from God. You go into my psychology department, that's not considered a construct we study. Because that's not considered, when I model the human condition, I don't put sin in there as separation from God.
So does that make sense? That makes sense to my question.
I don't have it in the model I'm working for of the human.
Well, that's kind of where the question originated, because these terms are all, like, it seems to me, and I could be wrong about this, I kind of want to know what you have to say, is that the psychological endeavor is it's more of a scientific endeavor into, like, if you're doing studies on human behavior and there's less moral framework around it. Like, even in our last conversation, we talked about narcissism and if Jesus is a narcissist. And the question was basically like, does a person's sense of self outweigh their true self in some sense? Like that's sort of what a narcissist would be. Like they see themselves as more, I get that's grandiose narcissist, right? Is that correct? So they see themselves as more as what they actually are. And then I got some feedback. People were like, yeah, but Jesus is God. And so he is what he said he was, which then I was like, okay, well so then is he a narcissist? I don't know. But the whole question, I guess, is just like, how do you then build that model that you were talking about? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it's hard to do this because what happens is you go from a modern psychology, we'd start when you talk about really what are spiritual terms, they're not really well established in the field. What we do is we can do a lot of things. Like I can measure what you mean by that. I can measure people's experience of that. I can measure their mystical experience. I can measure their beliefs. I can measure their experience of that. But we don't really have a spirit meter.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Ghostbusters. You know what I mean? Right. Like we don't really have that. We're like, oh, the presence of the Holy Spirit. Like I don't have a detector. Now maybe some quantum guy could build something like that. I mean, I'm cool if like maybe they could, but like we don't have that. So that's where I think you get the break is we can't do direct measurement of any sort of spiritual construct. But we could still talk about them. The problem that people make in psychology today or in the modern times is they go, well, we can't measure it, therefore it doesn't exist, which is just, it's not. But if you go read William James, I mean, who was the founder of American psychology, he didn't talk like that. So this modern sort of post-World War II kind of silly behavior, you know, it's still like the ghosts of behaviorism that still haunt us.
So I guess we'll kind of go through all of the different, not all of them, but some of the main things that you talked about in the essay. So you said that spiritual superiority showed a moderately strong association with communal narcissism. And I think, you know, as we go through, we could maybe define.
Can I interrupt you for one? Sorry. The question your listeners had about if Jesus was really the Son of God, could he be a narcissist?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Here's how I would. I'm stuck on that a little bit. Here's how I would think about that. Imagine you're the Son of God. What would you do?
It would be rough.
Now, if I were the Son of God, I'd get a Lambo. I'd get a T-shirt that says SOG, Son of God on it. I'd get an Insta account. I'd move to Bel Air. You know what I'm saying? Like the Fresh Prince. Like that's what I would do. When Satan took me to the mountain, he'd be like, this could be yours. I'm like, sweet.
Oh my gosh. So then Satan.
My point is.
Go ahead.
My point is like, there's a lot you could do as the Son of God if you were narcissistic. And Jesus didn't seem to roll that way. So that's how I would think about it more. Because there are a lot of people, like I went to some reggae show with some European prince once. Like you can be a prince and not be totally arrogant, and you could be the Son of God and not be narcissistic about it.
So there is some sort of, I think I understand like an inflated sort of showy Showtime, like, I don't know. I'm not thinking,
he's doing Showtime to his identity. Like he might have, like you could be a king, you could be the Caesar, you could be the whatever president, and you could be cool with that, or you could be like, check me out.
That's
a narcissism. It's using your identity to get attention and admiration from other people.
Okay, we don't have to go down this super deeply, but I just would be interested. I know it's so. Okay, so there's a verse where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And that seems like I understand what you're saying. Like he wasn't, you know, he could have had, I mean, I believe he was God, but whatever. He could have had like a spaceship and stuff and just blown people away and, you know, done crazy things. That said, like some of the things that he did do were crazy, you know, the miracles that he performed and some of the statements that he made, like he says, like, you have to be willing to die for my sake in the gospel. And some of these things are like, who else says that sort of stuff? So what do you think about that? And then we can go on to the essay.
I will say, I again, a California hippie, not going to talk, I'm not going to argue theology with anybody. When I read the Gospels, my take of Jesus gets a little complicated. Like it almost seems like there's a couple different personalities there. And there's one that's a little stronger, a little bit more of a bolder personality that can be more aggressive with people, like kicking tables over and stuff. Right. So there is that kind of strength in there. But I guess you do. This is the way through me. Is that him because like I'm the coolest guy? This is the only way to do it, or is it because like this is he's an avatar of something, and this is what he's. I don't know. I don't know, man. No, it's just but I would just suggest to people that if you really were super narcissistic and were the Son of God, you would probably do things differently than Jesus did. Like maybe not walk to your own death on a cross where you're mocked by people and have people gambling for your clothes. Like maybe you would go out like a frickin'.
I mean, it depends on what you mean. Like if you go out like a G and then you raise from the dead, I mean, that's pretty sweet too. Like, where you like, hey, give me everything you got. You guys can't kill me. I don't know. I feel like that's.
I hear you. I'm just saying, I get it. It doesn't seem like if I were writing a script like of a narcissistic superhero, it would not be the Jesus story.
For sure.
But again,
No. I think that all makes sense. And it's just interesting because that was like the main feedback. People were like, Jesus, whatever. So but I want to get to the essay. So you did talk about spiritual superiority and how it showed moderately strong association with communal narcissism. I guess a couple questions, like maybe we should flesh out what is spiritual superiority and what is communal narcissism, but like, what does that all mean?
Yeah. So it's basically when you start studying people in the spiritual world, and that could be Christian, but in this case, they were looking at people also doing yoga, I think, like energy work and sort of more classic hatha yoga. And what they found was that people in those traditions that were having spiritual superiority are saying like, yeah, I'm more enlightened than you. Yeah, I'm a little more in touch with God. My Tantra practice is I've actually moved my energy up my chakras a couple times. You probably don't know about that, but so it's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of like I'm a big deal and you're not.
Yeah. I mean, in charismatic Christianity, there's like I speak in tongues, and you don't speak in tongues.
Yeah, dude, it's like I was handling some snakes. Yeah, you probably couldn't do that, but it's cool. Yeah. Like I know how to do that stuff. Right. Yeah, I'd be like that. Same. It's just these practices are old, and so it's that would be associated with communal narcissism, and communal narcissism is a little different. And I think it would have been same with grandiose if they had it in there. But with communal narcissism, it's like, I'm the nicest person. Yeah. I'm the most moral person. I'm the best friend. So it's like grandiose narcissism. But instead of being like, I'm the best looking and the coolest, it's like, I'm the most moral and nicest.
And that
it's kind of like the church lady on Saturday Night Live. But that's a reference before your time.
But we all know, I mean, that's sort of like in Everybody Loves Raymond. What's Raymond's brother? I can't remember his brother's name, but his wife's parents are these like holy art thou, like they're just like Christian. They're better than everybody.
Yeah, it's that moralistic. Yeah. I'm better than you. I'm more Christian. That would be spiritual superiority. And that would be associated, that would also be, that's communal narcissism and spiritual superiority specifically. Like I'm more Christian than you. Yeah, that's what it's talking about. So it's that kind of narcissism. It's in that domain where from the outside, it could look like, this is just really a nice person. Yeah. This isn't somebody who's really self-centered.
Is it safe to say that spiritual superiority is dependent upon communal narcissism for it to operate properly, or no?
No, I don't think so. I think it would just be these things would go together. I don't think they're. I tend to think of narcissism as being sort of a strategy or mechanism for regulating, your the positivity of yourself. Like, so if my image is, I'm really the most Christian, moral person there is, more moral than all these other wannabes at church. Well, what I have to do is I have to do stuff to establish that, to keep that story going.
Right.
So maybe what I do is after church, I belittle the people next to me. Oh, did you see so-and-so? I could smell booze on his breath, blah, blah, blah. I bet he was out drinking last night. And you might do something in church where you sing a little better than people, so people pay attention to you. They're just things to draw attention, but somebody from the outside might say, well, they're really a nice person. They're really a good Christian. It's very communal what they're doing, but it's sort of ego-based.
Yeah. There was a guy at one church that I went to. It was a big church, and he would always sit up on the balcony above everyone, and he had this super low voice, and he would just belt out, and it was like, I was like, dude, shut up. Like, I can't even focus on anything, but it was so loud. And I don't want to say that he was doing it on purpose, but it went on for years.
Well, that's the thing. You don't necessarily know, because there's one guy driving a Ferrari because he thinks it's an awesome car, and one guy because he wants to look cool, and there's one guy singing at church because he feels the Spirit of the Lord, and the other guy just wants to look cool to Sally in the front row.
That's true. Yeah.
It's hard to tell sometimes.
Right, for sure. Well, there's a quote from the essay. Vonk and Visser reported that participants affiliated with more energetic spiritual training contexts, groups emphasizing activation, intense experiences, or paranormal themes, tended to score higher on spiritual superiority than those affiliated with more mindfulness-oriented contexts. So a couple of questions. One, just break that down a little bit. But two, I want to tell me if this analysis from a philosophical point of view is in accordance with what you're saying here. So I guess the way that I thought through this is that people who are more engaged in religious practices, in more expressive, experiential religious practices that seem more expressive, individualistic, are high in spiritual superiority. Would that, using philosophical terms, would that make sense?
I'm not sure. Sorry. Let me try to explain it and see if there's a Christian analog, and then maybe there's a philosophical analog. It would be, I think philosophically, it would be like Apollonian versus Dionysian, if it's sort of Nietzsche's model. But so in spiritual practice, there's sort of the practices that are more stabilizing, like mindfulness, meditation, or whatever that people do. I don't know what the Christian, prayer, contemplation, that are more stabilizing practices.
Personal devotionals, things like that. Yeah.
Personal devotional practice. They're grounding practices. They ground you. And then there are practices that are more energetic that, in energy work in yoga would be basically moving the Kundalini energy from the sacrum up the spine. So literally you're just moving energy up the chakras. So that could be a version of energy work, but there's, what would there be? There's, breath work pranayama or Wim Hof breathing, that's sort of energy work. And then there's people doing, also doing stuff like connecting with deities and chanting and those kind of things that they're talking. I mean, she mentions that a little bit in there, but I would tend to think of energy work as more like tantric yoga, where you're chanting and using breath to kind of move energy around your body.
Would you say,
I don't know if there's a Christian variant of this, maybe the snake handling or something, but I don't know.
I do personal liturgies most days. So I just sit there and I read the liturgy, which is just written biblical.
Yeah. And that would not be an energy practice. That would be like a stabilizing practice. Okay. That would be more like it'd be like reading scripture. It's just a different practice, like an energy practice in yoga. It's like literally you're just doing breath work, and you're sort of, you can do stuff. I don't mean to get all yogi here. I haven't done this stuff, but I've done a little like you can do stuff where you do bumblebee poses and hum, and you sort of have visual. You're basically tripping without
the drugs.
Drugs. Yeah. It's energy work. Okay. So that's where you see the ego more.
So that's where this comes into play, where basically people who are, so that's, I guess I probably took that the wrong way then. So these are just people who are literally, I would assume like more Eastern religious practices then.
Yeah, that's what you see in yoga. If you went down to Tulum and you know, down in the Caribbean, or you're down in Costa Rica, people are doing this kind of stuff. This is there, and what's going on is you have people that are probably more extroverted psychologically. They're probably more open. They're probably wired more like me, and they're going to be more narcissistic. And the people that are doing more centering practices, meditation, contemplation, reading scripture, prayer, are probably more neurotic, and it's stabilizing.
Interesting.
Them. You know, it's keeping them, making them grounded and peaceful.
So
so they can be more effective.
Yeah. I wondered as I was reading, you know, because these studies are relatively recent studies within the last like 25 years, like how much of how we study these things, and like when they're asking people questions or surveying people or whatever they do, like how much of this is determined by culture, social imaginary of a particular place, rather than, I don't know, say like a principle for religious experience, or that's sort of the only thing that I could think of there. But essentially, like, would this be, if they did the studies in the 1500s, would they find the same things, or would it be completely different?
I do think if you studied it in the 1500s, you would see the ego, the communal narcissism. Because I've been to England, I've been to Europe, I've seen the religious artifacts the rich people had, and the little prayer books and stuff. And I bet they had those just like, those like the fancy purses. Yeah. You'd probably have the most cool prayer book, and so I do imagine it was very similar. And I always, if you look at trade routes and pilgrimage routes, they're always kind of feeding off each other. There's always a little bit of feedback. So my guess would be it would be similar. That said, the people there's a lot of different religious practice, and it's just very different because there's sort of the Eastern practice that are more liberation practices that maybe you call it Gnostic practices that seem to be more ego-based. And then there's something which is maybe more Christian. And I don't know if Islam might be the same, and maybe some Judaism, more Abrahamic. I don't know if there's others where it's more connection. So I'm just going to spitball some theology, and you just stop me where I'm crazy.
Okay.
So the way I think about this stuff is Garden of Eden. You go, hey, you want to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, right? And if somebody asks me, I'm like, evil. Hell yeah, I'm doing it. I wouldn't even think twice. So, and Christianity, that's a bad story. That's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, right? You shouldn't have eaten that. Right. You go to the Greeks, and that's the story of Prometheus. And he's like, you're a hero. You got the fire, man. You got it. You stole it. You're the hero. Right. You go in all the other traditions, and it's kind of like eating the fruit was the right choice. And that's more of the Gnostic route of spirituality, is I'm trying to seek spiritual knowledge or spiritual wisdom. This is the path of Solomon. It's different than the path of devotion to God. It's like, no, I'm just going to follow God. I'm not going to I'm not looking for the tree of knowledge. I'm just going to do what's right, because that's what's going to bring me peace. It's been promised. So you get those two different paths. Now, where do you think you're going to find more of the ego? In the fruit eaters, or the people who don't eat the fruit? Right.
Definitely in the fruit eaters.
Right. Yeah. Include myself in that. I'd eat the fruit. I'm sorry. Just being honest.
I think that that's an interesting way of putting it. I guess, so the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, my understanding, and this is sort of like outside of the Bible, so as Protestants, it's all we have to say. This is outside of the Bible. It's just speculation. But anyways, this is all speculation. In the Garden of Eden, like my understanding or my thought process is that there would have been an opportunity for Adam and Eve to have eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or to have attained the knowledge of good and evil within its proper time. And so there's more an order of operations within the Christian way of doing things. Although I
understand that, because Enoch gets it.
Right.
So I do understand. Enoch wouldn't be scriptural.
Well,
I'm sorry, but in the book of Enoch,
he goes to
he
be
goes
with
there.
God. He doesn't die. He just gets to go to heaven. Enoch.
But he does. I think he does get the tree of knowledge at one
Oh,
point.
really? Okay.
But you're gonna, and Enoch, maybe Enoch.
See, I haven't
1.
read. I need to read
this,
those,
but this is it's apocryphal.
Yeah.
So
No, I know. I know.
Yeah.
That's like everybody's talking about the Nephilim now, and they're like quoting the Book of Enoch, and so.
I mentioned that on Jordan Peterson, and he gave me this look. I'm like, it's because I was studying ayahuasca for all these years and trying to figure out all these deities that we're seeing. And I'm like, I end up reading Enoch. That's where you end up. That's where all this stuff is coming from. Is guys are doing so much DMT, they're seeing all these deities, and they don't know what to do with it.
I mean, the weird thing about Enoch, and I hope I'm getting this right, is that James in the New Testament references the Book of Enoch. He has a clear reference to the Book of Enoch. I think it's James or Jude. And then there's another apocryphal reference where I think James or Jude mentions like how Satan and the archangel Michael fought for the body of Moses. And that's not in the Old Testament at all. Like that's nowhere. So there's some weird things like that where even in Protestant land, you're like, okay, obviously, if we think that the word of God is infallible and James and John is mentioning in infallible words, something like that. Now, I'm not saying that the Book of Enoch is like infallible or anything like that, but it's just, anyways, interesting. Like people should read it.
It always gets interesting it's an edge case.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ethiopian Bible. It's an edge case.
Even the Catholic Bible feels, Okay. Let me give another quote from the essay that I found to be interesting. So you said Zondag 2006, which is a study, also examined motivations for entering the pastorate. This was interesting and kind of depressing a little bit. For some individuals, the role represented service and calling. For others, it offered recognition, authority, and a central social position. The broader conclusion is not that clergy are uniquely narcissistic, but that religious leadership roles, like secular ones, can attract individuals comfortable with visibility and influence. So break that down.
I always try to, because I don't want people to like, they kind of go, it sounds so bad. I'm like, it's just sort of the nature of things. If you have a role of somebody in like, you're going to be running the flock of sheep and they're the sheep and you're running the flock and everyone's going to look up to you on Sunday morning and you're going to make decisions for everybody and talk to them publicly and tell them what to do, like who's going to be attracted to that? And you're going to have some guy that says, I've been called to this since I was young or had this vision, and this is what I'm called to do. This is my service. And he's going to run a tiny little church in the middle of nowhere, and he's going to meet 3 people. and then the guy, then there's going to be a guy who's going to be like, this is my opportunity to shine. This is what I'm good at. I feel God talking to me in particular. And he's going to run a church out of a football stadium in the Southeast somewhere and have his own private jet.
Charge tickets to get in on Sunday.
Charge tickets, and he's going to be real good at it. So what you see is that there's a range of motivations, but the people that are motivated for fame and fortune are going to get more fame and fortune than the people that aren't.
I mean, my thoughts immediately went to the fact that this is probably something that is recent. Like I bet in religious history, more narcissistic people have always been drawn to the sort of, I don't know, like the corporate ladder of Christianity. So you've got like Anglican Catholic churches that are very hierarchical, and there's guys who want to get to be the archbishop, the pope, those sorts of things. But it does seem like all of those guys were sort of concentrated into one particular area, especially prior to the Reformation. And then even after that, you had like the Anglican Church, there was the Archbishop of Canterbury, and then the several archbishops. But there was like concentrated power, where nowadays, I think as things have become more liberalized in culture and society, and there's like a million different church denominations and then non-denominations, it feels like there's an opportunity for everyone to become the narcissist, there's way more opportunity to draw those narcissistic people into the pastorate.
Absolutely, because if you're in the Catholic Church, it's basically like working for IBM in the old days. And I mean, we just lost our priest up the road, and I'm kind of pissed about it. I'm like, this kid, like all the students love this guy, and that the whoever's in charge, the bishop, just moved him.
Catholic,
and I'm like, yeah, and I'm pissed. I'm going to go yell at the bishop because I'm not Catholic and I don't get the rules because I'm Protestant. I'm like, I'm going to go yell and get this guy back and hire him and start my own effing church and burn the thing down. But like the Catholic, it's like very hierarchical. It's like the military. Like it's a military order. Yeah. And so you can't build that big ego thing. As soon as you build your big ego church, they're just going to pull you off to something else. Yeah. But if I can go, and this is what I learned when I wrote the Narcissism Epidemic before the financial crisis, is the financial system in the US mixed with ego is I could go borrow $5 million tomorrow to go build a mega church, and I could get the money to do it. So not only, like, if I have the ego, I could actually get the money, and I'm not paying property tax, so I can actually make the business work really well. So we're subsidizing church creation that's sort of opportunistic and really attractive in this country.
Yeah, and there's billions of dollars flowing through the big evangelical
And I will say, as having been to Canterbury not too long ago and said the Lord's Prayer and was the only one saying it in the cathedral there. This was in April, I think.
Really?
Yeah, May. I don't think I'd been. I just went down there. They're charging admission to go see it because they're bankrupt, because no one goes to these Anglican churches anymore because they're not hustling like the Americans.
Or also because like the Anglican Church in England has become a shell of what it used to be. You've got like lesbian.
They made some political choices that drove away their base.
It was that frustrates me because I love the Anglican Church. I believe that Anglicanism and the 39 Articles and the Book of Common Prayer and their liturgy is like, I remember I talked to Jordan Peterson about this. He said Carl Jung basically thought that, and I might be wrong about this, so you tell me if I'm misquoting, that like Catholicism leans towards tyranny or can be too tyrannical, and like non-denominationalism, I don't know if you use that terminology, but is like essentially too individualistic. I think that Anglicanism is like right there in the middle of them. Very well. See, the dogs, the animals agree. The dogs agree.
Arf. Good boy.
It's just right there, and I think it's like the perfect in between. But yeah, go ahead.
It fell. Unfortunately, it has fallen. Yeah, I agree with you. I like the Episcopal Church. I was raised in it. But,
man, dude, the Episcopal Church is bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, it kind of collapsed.
Have you ever looked into the sexual scandals in the Episcopal Church in America? They are the numbers are beyond comprehension. It's like never talked about.
And what? Pardon me for 1 second.
No, you're good.
Come here, bud. Come on, bud. Come. What? Tell me in specific, because I should know this.
I need to get that. My dad read this massive book about, I don't even know what was it. It was about like sexuality in the West, and I should get all of the exact numbers. But basically, like the church with the most, I want to say, pedophilic and just like people cheating on their spouses, and even some like homosexual, like kind of outside of the realm of your classic Christian doctrine in America. It's the Episcopal Church, and I think it's by quite a bit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I didn't even know, like, it didn't surprise me when he told me this, because when you drive around Madison, Wisconsin, every Episcopal church is like pride flag. I don't know if I could go to an Episcopal church in good conscience in America. I don't know if there are any left. But the numbers, I'll try to get it and send it to you, because the numbers are like astronomical, and I've never heard anybody talk about it.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I haven't either. And I just know the church got very political. It just, and like, I'm like, it's like I go to work out. I don't want my cell phone. I go to church. I don't want to talk about frickin' politics.
Yeah, from people who don't know anything about politics.
I just not interested at all.
No,
in hearing about.
I agree. Especially from people who don't know.
I think they made Yeah, I think that's a poor choice. I think politics and mixing those. Anyway, academics made the same
Yeah.
choice. We decided. I say we generally decided we should politicize what we
Yeah.
do. And I suggested that if you do that, you might lose half your audience. But other people thought we knew so much
Right.
it was important to do.
Right. And the
So
same thing is
that was
happening.
that.
A lot of these schools are going
Yep.
bankrupt. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
biggest evangelical theological divinity schools in the world for a while, especially like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in the Chicago area. They were massive, like the best professors, a lot of guys that I really like, they don't exist anymore. And they were like massive in the 90s and early 2000s. And they just, the building is gone. Like they had to sell the building and everything. Like it's done. And I think it's because they kind of just, they slid with the cultural, like we're just going to kind of, just like the secular schools did as well. Like 95% of the faculty they vote Democrat. And it's like, not that should matter, but it's also like, you'd like that to be a little bit more split so that, people are thinking. I mean, it can become an echo chamber.
I don't care what people believe if it doesn't affect what you do in your job, but it does. And that's where I mean, when you get 95%, it kind of breaks the thing.
Yeah.
So it happened to us too. So it's not just the Episcopalians, anybody else.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that grandiose narcissists are more attracted to, say, non-denominationalism and having their own church, or are they more attracted to, like, maybe the really ambitious ones want to become the Pope? Like which church?
Yeah, I think it would be like a cult leader.
Oh.
Like I think that would be the draw, because you're kind of doing your own thing, and then you get control of people, and then you can isolate them from everybody else, write your own rule book. So I think the ultimate expression of narcissism religiously would be starting your own cult. So you become the religious leader. Yeah. Which is, of course, why people are asking about Jesus narcissism in the first place. But you can think of a lot of examples of people who start religions, and you go, well, yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, that would be the dream. I mean, not for me. I never wanted to start a religion. But, imagine if you had an ego, you're like, I'm going to start my religion.
Well, look at all the Netflix documentaries on cults. And I mean, people... And I always find these to be funny because like the main guy is like, all the women have to have sex with me and you need to give me all your money. And it's like, I don't know. Personally, I'm kind of like, okay, if that's sort of like the core tenets of the religion that you're starting, it just seems to be a little fake to me. I don't know.
But that's every single, like, that's how they all go. Yeah. I mean, like everyone, east, west, north, south,
right,
Christian,
right.
I mean, pagan, doesn't matter. Yeah, I agree. Just that's kind of how people roll. Guys get power, it's sexual access, then they extract the money. Yep. Hopefully that's all.
Yeah. Well, and I think that leads into one of the quotes out of your essay. He said, the result of a narcissistic church leader can be complex, but is often toxic in the long run. In the short term, you might see high levels of charisma that help fill seats, but over time, with a narcissistic church leader, you are likely to see greater interpersonal conflict, infidelity, financial mismanagement, and excessive risk-taking. Kind of just to what you said, that seems to be the case. Like, so how do they measure all that? Are they sort of following a pastor for a long period of time, or how?
I mean, there is not great data on this, like at all. What happens is you get these large surveys done of people that, and this is just there's not like a big body of researchers. Like I'm really into like the narcissism of religion. There's just like a few people looking at this just because they're interested. Yeah, right. And typically it's hard to get these data. So they'll do cross-sectional data. Oh, we got data from, 500, religious leaders, and we measured their narcissism and looked at the size of their congregation and how long they'd been in power or something. Okay. But you're not built these sort of longitudinal models. I'm just filling in the gaps, and maybe I'm doing it too much. I'm just sort of basing it on leadership models.
I guess from my personal experience, we've gone to several mega churches, and every single one of them have ended the same way, which is part of the reason why we were just like, all right, we're going to like a small little Presbyterian church or whatever.
I'm just going to suggest, I mean, I think I'm probably right on this, but it's not like 100%, you do get charismatic people that are just enjoy it and don't cross all the lines, but it's just, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. So I think the most interesting thing in the essay, in my opinion, is you said Freud argued that in charismatically led groups, followers project their ego ideal, their internal image of who they would like to be, onto the leader. The leader becomes the embodiment of the follower's aspirations. Yeah. I feel like Freud hit the nail on the head there, which is painful to say sometimes for a Protestant like me. But first, what does that mean? Second, what do you think about that?
It's a really interesting idea, and it's an idea that I've kind of clung on to a long time. So, because it's also the same model he used for falling in love. Oh. It's the same kind of model. So imagine, and it's mid to late Freud. So anyway, the idea that he had a concept of the ego ideal, which sort of became the superego. But you imagine it as sort of a representation of everything I really want to be. So it's I'm noble and I'm smart and I'm good and successful and all these things that I want to be that I don't quite make it. And it's very hard living with this because every day I wake up and I look in the mirror and I yell at my kids and I'm a jerk and I go, God, there's this ideal self and I'm not that self. And there's a tension there that makes me feel bad. And so there's different ways of getting rid of that tension. What Freud says is one way people do it is they project that ego ideal onto a leader. So you go, my goal of being noble and good and powerful is actually what that leader embodies. He is that ideal person. And if I'm with him, I feel like I have achieved my ego ideal because it's right there with me. It's not in my head causing me distress. I'm literally with it right now. Yeah. And so by celebrating that leader, by loving that leader or admiring that leader, I'm escaping the tension of my ego ideal as an internal construct. And by externalizing it, I feel this incredible joy because I no longer have this internal pressure of who I should be.
Interesting.
And instead, I just have my leader. So sometimes if you think about this model of falling in love, which I don't think guys do anymore, but when I was young, you used to fall in love. And you'd meet a cute girl and you'd be worried about school and all this stuff, but you'd fall in love with Susie and you go like, Susie's so cute. And you think about Susie and you wouldn't be worried about school and you wouldn't be worried about anything else because your ego ideal was over there and everything you wanted in life was Susie. Yeah. So you didn't need to worry about it. And it's the same with a leader.
So you don't think that people
follow the Maharishi Guru Pope von Wittgenstein and he's just the God on earth and I just follow him and it's just awesome.
You don't think people can fall in love with their AI companions like that?
Absolutely. It scares the heck out of me.
You think they can't? I guess you're right. They probably can. You just said that young men don't fall in love anymore.
I do think they can. I think that's the sick part is because it's hard with other people because other people are humans and they don't just tell you you're awesome, but your AI conform because it's basically a narcissist. It's a mirror. Yeah. So it conforms to everything you want and tells you what you want. It's much easier to fall in love with because you're falling in love with yourself.
Can I say something?
I mean, it's really twisted.
It's extremely twisted.
Sorry.
No, it reminds me of something that's like that I think that's controversial, and I'm just going to say it. Whatever. That seems to be similar, not the exact same, because AI can like construct itself, like form itself to exactly what you want. It's almost like when I'm like even asking questions for fun, which I kind of have stopped doing because it'll like pick up on weird linguistic cues and it'll know what direction I want to go. It's too weird. And then I'm like, you're telling me what I want to hear, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for feedback. Anyways, it does seem like what you just said, the mirror aspect, it does seem like also an aspect of homosexuality, like homosexual relationship. I mean, one of the realities, like heterosexual relationships are difficult because men and women are so different. It's like, my wife and I, we
it's a union of opposites.
It's a union of opposites. It makes it sound like my marriage is bad. It's not. I love my wife, but we don't always see eye to eye because we're coming from completely opposite biological, psychological, we're different. Whereas homosexual relationships are obviously it's a man and a man. So there's more continuity between the two. I don't know what that has to do with the AI stuff. I guess just that there's a mirroring aspect to it, but that's just the first thing.
No, I mean, Freud talked about this when he talked about narcissism. I mean, and sort of almost, it's essentially self-love. So it's same-sexual.
Yeah.
So he did talk about this, but it's not something that's like, I don't think it's I mean, I wouldn't think about it in terms of like modern sexuality. I would think about it more like Freud's using sexuality as a metaphor for something psychological.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that makes sense. I
mean, you can add moral components to that if you're a Christian, and you could make a moral case. I think you could make a theological case against homosexuality from a Christian perspective, but just on the psychological basis, I think what you just said makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's like dudes that are into dudes are going to be caught up with AI any differently than anybody else. I don't think it has to do with actual sexual orientation, but I do think when Freud's talking about it, there's something about this self-love itself that it's easier in a weird way because there isn't that. So there is something that he was talking about there.
Yeah.
So I think you're sort of hitting an intuition that Freud was hitting back in the day.
There's two cultural examples that I can think of, and tell me if you know either of these. One of them's in the church, one of them's outside of the church, one of them's like corporate. That has to do with this dynamic that Freud is talking about, that people sort of project themselves onto their leaders or what they want to be onto their leaders. Yeah. Did you ever hear the WeWork situation, that whole scandal?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
There was a documentary on it, and it drove me crazy because this guy was given like $1 billion for some like Japanese investor who just kind of liked him. And he started this WeWork thing, was basically a bunch of millennials who lived together and partied together. And it was sort of like a religious cult in some ways. But it was a corporate thing that was a lot of money involved. It was weird. But in the documentary, they had all these people who had been with this CEO who had started this company from the beginning. And there's all this language around they are a pure victim to this man who completely took advantage of them. And everybody who ever was involved in WeWork was taken advantage of by this guy who had started the company. And then there's another example. I don't know if you ever heard of the podcast series called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Did you ever hear that?
No.
So Mark Driscoll was he still is like a famous pastor. He had a massive mega church in the early 2000s in, I think, I want to say Seattle area, but I could be totally wrong about that. And he was super controversial because he was one of these guys who was like, sometimes he like cussed people out. He was just like a big character, and he was kind of aggressive, and he would call men out because he thought the men were being cowards and whatever. So after the church fell apart, they did this huge podcast series called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. That was the name of the church, Mars Hill. And everybody in that podcast series was like, I'm a victim to Mark Driscoll. I'm a victim. Like, he made me be this way. And I hate that stuff in general because I think that people have individual ability to say no to that stuff. I get that there is a reality to which these charismatic leaders can enforce things on people, but like, it feels like, based off of what Freud said here, that some of the dynamic here is that the congregants in these churches or the people involved in these organizations reinforce the narcissistic leadership. And so they're complicit in the fallout.
I I would say two things. And one is that this stuff is a cycle.
Yeah.
But two, people don't get into it knowing what they're getting into.
Yeah, that's true.
So when I go join Mars Hill Church or whatever, I mean, I don't know anything about it, but like I go because my friends go and they say it's good and I'll be in touch with Jesus and might help me with some stuff. And I go and it's a good experience and people are nice. And that's how I get into it. I don't get into it because it's ego and stuff. And then I, become involved. And I start to like this guy. And then I become part of the inner circle. I go to the men's night and then become in the inner circle. And he talks to me and we become friends. And then he starts to do psychological ops on me. So he starts to, cut me off from my friendship groups. He started, your friend Andy, he's kind of, he's a good guy, but whatever. So he cuts you off from all your external things of support. He says, you should read this literature. You say, here are my thoughts. He starts to make you question your beliefs. That's one way to think about it, but maybe this. Starts maybe gaslighting you. I believe this. Oh, no, that's not true. So pretty soon you're really destabilized and it snuck up on you because this is a guy you liked and admired a lot. And he's just done a psychological surgery on you. And now you basically have no way to protect yourself. And then he does, whatever it is, sexual, could be money, could be crime, could be, you just have to defend him doing that.
Or it could just be like a general manipulation of the systems. Like I think
it is.
No, I want one example that I just had that was a church that we had gone to for a very long time. That I think all these dynamics are happening, and it's a big mega church. Is just getting people involved into that inner circle, making them feel like they're sort of special, and then sort of doing some theological gaslighting because it's a congregationally, quote unquote, congregationally led church where the congregants vote for the things that the church does. And I'm like, nobody's voting. We say we're voting, but everybody's doing exactly what the pastor tells them to do all the time. And so like no one disagrees with them. So where's the accountability? Anyways, there's still some pain there. No, that's why I could go off on it. But
absolutely. But I have a lot of sympathy for people who find themselves in these positions because you don't walk into it that way. It doesn't happen to you 3 times.
Yeah.
Maybe twice, but usually the third time you're kind of like, oh man, I see myself getting sucked into this again. So I do think it happens and it's slowly, and just slice. Yeah.
What's the best defense against this for your average person, not super charismatic, not super disagreeable? I think that's one of the issues too. A lot of these people are just pretty agreeable.
People that are, typically you're drawn to church, you're a little more agreeable, you want to be with other people. And so, setting up a hard boundary with an authority figure in a Christian community is going to be a little hard. So I would get other people that are aligned with you that help you test reality or check reality. So you build a connection of friends. You're like, does this seem right? What he's doing seems a little off. And I like the guy, but he seems a little off. Do you feel that? And he seems a little off. And then you get 3 or 4 of you, and then you can kind of build your own model of reality and have some support doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying to overthrow a church, but I'm just saying that's what you need because it's hard to do it. I mean, if I'm going up against if I went up against Tony Robbins, and I'm not saying he's a bad person or anything, but just somebody with that personality, like Tony's going to beat me. I got a pretty big ego. I got a pretty big personality, but no, I'm no Tony Robbins. I'm not going to go up against that guy. So I'd have to get 5 or 6 friends. And when he's like, and I'm like, they're like, dude, it's Tony. He's doing his Tony thing again. Just let him be. So I think that is useful. And I also, and as same with dating, is always look at people's track record. So if you're in a church and you're like, God, this person's kind of got a shady past, you're like, it's probably not a good thing. A lot of times in Christianity, of course, the story is, I had this shady past and then I found God. And, after my first 3 churches, I stole all the money. This time, God told me not to steal the money. So, but I think that looking at somebody's track record is really important. And then look who's around them. Like you gave a really good example is ideally there's a strong board. but in this case, as you're saying, that it's like a CEO that sort of controls the board himself. There isn't anybody watching the watchers. And so I think, making sure there's a strong external board in a church is just going to lead to better governance in general. And like, dude, if I'm a pastor, I don't want my ego getting out of control either, because then I'm going to wreck my own thing. Like, it's not a bad.
Right. That makes, no. Well, but it does get to the point with some of these guys where they can't even see how this thing could be derailed because they're so in on their vision for the thing. Like, I had a pastor, same church that I was talking about before, where I was starting to get a little skeptical of some of the things that were going on, and we were having meetings. I had a closer relationship with him, and I was pushing back on some stuff. And it finally got to the point where he just said to me, if you disagree with me, then you disagree with God. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think so, man. And there was a lot more to the conversation, but it was like pretty blatantly, like if you go against me, you go against God. And I was like, yeah, but like, we're both kind of quoting God, like we're quoting the Bible at each other, and we're both like kind of engaging in this. And so, I don't know. One, I just don't ever use God. Like, I just don't like the idea of like, if you go against me, you go against God, because I could be wrong. But that was where I was sort of like, yeah, maybe we need to get out of here. Because it seems like
if somebody said that to me, I think I'd break down laughing.
Yeah, I was like 22, so I was sort of like, what the hell, dude? But yeah,
it's weird. There was a scene like that with during the pandemic where one of our leaders said, I am the science or something. And that was
kind of was it Fauci or something?
Yeah, I was Fauci. That was when I think he destroyed people's trust in science for the next generation. I mean, I think he did more damage. But that kind of attitude that's where it gets that's destructive. Healthy.
Can I ask one final question about the general psychological endeavor? I don't know how it relates to this, but sort of how it relates, I guess, to what we were talking about in the beginning of different words, different terminology, moral frameworks, things like that. I've always struggled with the psychological study in the broad, like, I guess, allowing everybody to study psychology, which sounds like authoritarian, but I've struggled with that because I'm like, there does seem to be a lack of moral framework around the study, whereas scientific endeavors, and I guess I'm fleshing this out as we talk, scientific endeavors from the beginning of science in the Western world, or from the beginning of the scientific endeavor in the Western world, have been rooted in some sort of religion or religious presupposition, like Newton and some of these earlier guys were part of the church. They're Christian. They had sort of Christian presuppositions, and so their goal in the scientific endeavor was to learn more about God's creation, which meant that there was sort of a moral framework around what should and should not be studied, which is why I think the Nazis got involved in some pretty messed up stuff. When you take God out of the picture and you start to do study on like scientific, like the eugenics and things like that, that's sort of...
That all came from the U.S. But
okay. Well,
yeah, that was all progressivism from the U.S. I mean, and originally from Great Britain. I mean, that's all.
Which is but the progressivism rooted, like, would you say rooted in a denial of God, or sort of like the Enlightenment theory brought to its conclusion?
I think I think we had. I think a lot of that thinking, the eugenic thinking, is treating people like cattle. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it was British genetics that were using, breeders' equations and stuff. So I think that's where they were coming from, and a lot of it coming out of Darwin. So it was kind of thinking of people just like you thought about other animals.
Yeah.
Skinner built all his models on pigeons and rodents. Yeah. So I mean, I do think that's part of it, and not seeing any difference between a human and another animal, which would be something that a Christian would say, well, there's a difference. Like we have souls and other animals don't. And in psychology, there isn't really that
right
that gradation necessarily. But because
there's
the early.
Sorry. I mean,
I'm sort of just thinking as you ask this question, William James, who started American psychology, wouldn't call him he was a mystic,
Sure.
and he studied Christianity, also Eastern. Carl Jung was a mystic. What you find in Western psychological tradition is what you might call perennialism or Western perennialism. And it's a religious form that's a blend of sort of Vedic Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity. And you see it if you read Thoreau's Walden Pond.
Okay.
Thoreau goes to Walden Pond. His book is, dedicated to, I think he brought the Gita, the Hindu Gita with him. And transcendentalism came out of that.
Okay.
So so when Huxley wrote the Perennial Philosophy, what he argued was that all religious experience is fundamentally the same, or there's a universal core to religious experience, which is this mystical experience or direct connection with God, which he called the Perennial Philosophy. So Huxley's book, The Perennial. So that view, which is a perennialist, meaning that all religion is essentially the same, is the one that sort of influences academia. So academics are 80% atheists, 5%, I'm making these numbers up, 5% sort of Abrahamic, and then the rest are this sort of weird perennialist, psychedelic
coexist bumper sticker.
No, that's the child version. This is the adult version. This is
like what I feel like Jordan Peterson.
This is Timothy Leary doing. This is what they were. These guys were doing in LSD experiments. This is what Carl Jung was doing. So they're. It's like mystical. Shit, this is all getting weird, but if you go back to the King James Bible and Bacon and all that, I mean, they had John Dee, the court wizard or whatever he was, Merlin, and then they took that whole tradition in the West and they put it underground through like Rosicrucianism or Freemasonry. There are all these occult traditions.
Yeah.
So we've had this esoteric path in the West. And you see it pop up in psychology through this sort of Western, theosophical, perennialistic, New Age, whatever you want to call it. That's where it pops up. You do see some Christianity through positive psychology and guys like David Myers. And, there's a lot of impact from the Templeton Foundation. David Myers and the Templeton Foundation, and they kind of pushed a lot of Christianity in, but mostly it's this perennial philosophy.
Yeah. This is so interesting because there's like 10 million things because the what you said just about some of these guys viewing all religions as essentially sort of the same in a lot of ways. So I think I talked to you about G.K. Chesterton in the last podcast. I can't remember, but he's like a Christian. He was a Catholic and he was alive in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He wrote a book called The Everlasting Man, and then another one called Orthodoxy. But I can't remember which one had this in there. But basically, he made the exact opposite argument, where he was like, all religions look the same. They have the same rituals. They have the same sorts of things that people do, the same songs and the same melodies, and a lot of things they look the same on the outside, but at the core they're completely different. I'm just trying to think about like what would it look like. Like I want those ideas to contrast or to go after each other in some way, because I when I listen to somebody like Jordan Peterson talk, it feels like he's trying to bring, and I don't know if this is even if he's ever going to be able to do it, but what you're talking about with Jung and some of these psychologists, bringing it together with some of these ideas. I mean, just like your old school Christian, Catholic, Protestant, like these principles of Christianity. Now, I read his book, We Who Wrestle with God, where he made an attempt at some of that. I don't know if it's possible to do that because I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm just talking.
I think the reason I mention this perennialism is I think what you're saying is, and it goes back to the religion, the eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden. The psychologists, the 15 who were religious would have eaten the damn fruit.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And that means, when you see these guys that power and we're going to take over the world and make God, like Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
And the reason they will, I know they will, is because I would.
Yeah.
Because I'm fucking great. It's just, I hope I've gotten a little more wisdom, but that's just the nature of the mind that wants to understand the mind. Right. Is that you're willing to, you're sort of hungry to seek, like Freud said, my tyrant is psychology. And you really want to find this stuff, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to find this. If you read about Solomon going around to Egypt and bringing back all the wisdom and basically doing demonology. And that's what people do when they want to find the truth. Right. So you end up with these two paths, and chaos ensues. And that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Do you think that, one, I think that's exactly what you're even seeing some of the conversations popping up about Freemasonry and some of these old secret societies. And like, people never would have thought conversations about the Nephilim. Maybe like 15 years ago, I don't think anybody would have thought that would have been like a mainstream conversation, or like people are like, is Hillary Clinton a lizard? I don't know. So like, nobody would have even thought this stuff. And I actually think, generally speaking, just as a Christian, I'd rather those be the conversations than it be like, hey, I this is my experience, I guess, but like growing up, it was like, I'm a Christian, I think there's a spiritual realm. And it's like, no, only thing that's real is what's material. That was sort of what it was like for a long time. And so, yeah, maybe there aren't Nephilim, and maybe not everybody's a lizard, who knows? But I would rather people be talking about that than what we were talking about, which was pretty boring and, I think, reductionistic.
I think it's a lot of fun. I tend to think the world is very, very strange and mysterious. I've never met a Nephilim, though. But my Nephilim joke that I was at the football training down here at the facility, watching these 300-pound people running like 20-year-olds, and some guy next to me looks over and just goes, Nephilim. That's the Nephilim. Yeah. And I started laughing. I mean, we're in a very religious part of the country here, and so that would have been. So I do find this stuff really interesting. We're in a very strange time, and all this UFO stuff. So we've had this huge psychedelic renaissance, and then all this UFO stuff, and then the Christian, it's Great Awakening is happening. Sort of, I always say Great Reset versus the Great Awakening, and it's all happening at once.
With the technological revolution as well at the same time.
With the people trying to create the AI God and writing books like, whatever that Deus, book that Harari wrote. So that, a bunch of these guys thinking they're going to make God and upload consciousness. And it's like, oh, you clowns. It's a really interesting time.
I know I should. Let me just one real quick, because this was like where I was going with the old question. I couldn't remember it, but then I remembered all the things you just said about Jung and all of these psychologists and sort of their perspective on, if they were in the garden, they would have taken the fruit. That, as a Protestant, I'm like, that's horrifying. That doesn't make me feel very good.
I just made that up. By the way, this is, I think it's probably true.
No, I think that's true as well. My question is, should the masses be studying these people? Like not in a bad way. Like I don't, how am I saying? People who study psychology, like I talk to people like you, and you've done this professionally, and you're very disciplined in it. And then you get like the person who studied like social work in school, and they've got sort of peripheral understandings of psychological concepts, not to the degree that you or Jordan Peterson or any of these really famous people have. And the way that you talk about things and the way that Jordan Peter talks about things is with a lot more humility, in my opinion, than like the person who just graduated with their master's in social work, who thinks that they know everything about human behavior, and then are going out and like they're becoming psychologists, or I don't know what they become, but they like go into the workforce and they implement these ideas that they don't really fully understand, which I feel the same way about theological studies. So maybe that's just an issue that I have in general.
I have earned my humility.
Sure.
by failing and being wrong
Sure.
spectacularly many times. And the world is really complicated. And what happens if you're there are very few being an academic is like being a pro athlete or anything else. There's not a lot of them. And you what happens is you kind of climb to the top of the mountain in the area, and you think when you get to the top of the mountain you're going to understand things, and you get to the top of the mountain and you look around and go, there's 6,000 mountains around me. I don't have the energy to get up. Maybe I could do one more if I'm real smart, but that's it. And then you go, my God, the universe is amazing. I've been dealing with little diorama models thinking I was talking about the world, but I was just playing with toys.
That's the worst feeling.
But the only way to realize you're playing with toys is to get all the way up that mountain.
That's true.
And if you don't do that, then what happens is you get wisdom. I write a paper and you read something I wrote and go, I understand narcissism. I'm like, dude, I don't understand narcissism.
That's my point. That's my point.
Like, I don't know. I've been thinking about this for 30 years. It's kind of mysterious to me.
Right. That's my point. Like I don't know. Maybe we just generally in our culture just need more humility in approaching these things. I think that social media doesn't help because you read a book or you watch a 10-minute video, and then people go on social media and they're like, I'm an expert on global economics or whatever.
No, it takes my joke is not a joke. It's just the way academia works is it's usually for me about 5 years to understand something. Like when I was good, it would take me about 5 years. When I try to understand religion and the Nephilim and all that, I spent about 7-8 years and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't understand it.
What stopped you? Sorry, you could. I know we said an hour, so I don't need to keep pushing.
I know, and I've got to cook, but I'll just tell you, I was studying shamanic ayahuasca.
Sure.
So to understand it, I was training in it. Not heavy, but I'm like a real like I like to if I'm going to understand something, you got to do it. You can't just read about it. So I was training a little bit and couldn't understand it. I'm like, this is so insane. It's like I had a Christian guy talk to me and I was so much more religious than him. I think it scared him because this stuff is so powerful. And I was trying to understand this because anyway, it gets very weird. There's deities, there's all sorts of stuff. There's mystics, there's gods, there's demons. It's a very difficult place to navigate. There's spiritual battles that happen. This stuff is real as far as I can tell. It's very strange. And so I tried to understand it by reading all the old literature because that's what you do. And I've traveled. I've been to Tibet. I've been to India. I've been to all the stuff. I've been to done a shamanic ceremony in the Andes, and I've done it all. And I can't understand it. Like the world is deeply, deeply mysterious. And what happens is to understand something, you need not just to understand it, but you need a model of the whole cosmos, the whole world, the metapsychology to understand that thing, if that makes sense. And so we don't have that model. And so you have to build out. And so what happens historically is people get in this position like me, like William James is like, I got to understand this. You end up with religion and mysticism and you quote a bunch of saints and some Vedic stuff. And you end up back with perennialism where we started because or you end up going, oh, it's biological. And you come up with some bio-neuro sort of fake explanation for things. So you do something reductionistic. But no one is really understanding this. There was a paper I just read from a cognitive scientist trying to explain how spiritual forces can enter, and trying to make this argument cognitively. And so what academics are doing is they're making these arguments, but they're sort of arguing around it. So they're not saying like spiritual forces exist. They're saying like, well, we can't disregard. They're kind of doing the inverted argument to make the argument. That's what's going on right now. It's like people they don't really know what's going on. A lot of people are trying to figure this spiritual stuff out in different sort of very fringy ways. some people using quantum stuff, some using energy models and biology,
Right.
some using real sophisticated AI. I don't really know a lot.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
Sorry, just couldn't.
That's interesting. I mean, I can't. I feel like, in a weird way, like some of what you say, I haven't studied any of this stuff as much as you have at all, but there is a certain level to when you're looking into things, and even like in Protestant, like I have the presupposition of Protestantism and like Calvinist, like, which is like everybody hates the Calvinists, and yet like there's. Like, I don't know, there's just weird things at the core of all of this stuff. So like the further I look into something, which is where Chesterton has been helpful just in general for a framework for me in thinking, is like when you get to the core of something, you see some strange paradox or contradiction. And
Yeah.
I've my approach is like, I guess that's just how it is. And like, because I believe in God, I'm sort of like, yeah, I guess God is, I'll understand it when I die or something like that, which is a little bit more comforting for me. But it is frustrating because there are, I wouldn't have thought about like hypnosis or any of the weird stuff that people are talking about these days. We talked about a little bit last time, just hypnosis in general, just the idea of it. I read a book where they were talking about like TV ads that were being banned in the United States and all these strange things where you're like, okay, with all the screens and the TVs and everything that I'm looking at, like, how am I being influenced by people or things or spirits or whatever that I don't know or understand? And then what's the way out of that? Because I don't want to be controlled by the wrong spirit or the wrong thing. And then I look around at the whole culture and how most people aren't even trying to ask those questions at all. And then that sort of is like disheartening because I'm in a democracy with these people and we have to decide who's going to run this thing together. And I don't want to be deciding with people who are controlled. So, and all of that is to say, like, it's all very, I sympathize with what you're saying. It's just difficult and I don't fully know where to get all the deep answers to things. But the psychological realm has just been the most confusing for me. I feel more comforted in theology, and maybe I don't know why that is. Probably just because I grew up Christian.
No, I mean, people are different. Some people like the biological world. Right. That's their comfort place, and the psychology makes them nervous.
Right.
It's all. It's just, this stuff is very hard and complicated, and when people say they figured it out, I'm usually a little dubious.
Call them a liar. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Sorry for taking more of your time. The essay is good.
Oh, no, you're welcome. I'm like, I got to start cooking, but it's fun talking to you. And even though it's late for me, I enjoy it. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for watching this interview. Just wanted to remind you to go on over to theparadoxpress.com right now. Check out the new site, check out the new essays, check out the old essays, check everything out. Give us your email, sign up for our newsletter, and we will send everything for free to your inbox every single week. Podcast, essay, we'll send it all over there. It is a new publication for setting forth a vision for conservatism and for Christians in America. And so going over to theparadoxpress.com, theparadoxpress.com. The link is in the description.